Gaige Grosskreutz is one of the central figures in this Kenosha shooting. He was one of those shot by Kyle during the night. He lived. He got his arm almost blown off. And there's been a lot of banter about what his past criminal record was. Some of the claims look credible. Some of them look like they've been exaggerated or completely false. What are these claims? And what do we know about Gaige's past criminal history? Hello out there. I'm trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
Okay, so we have obtained the criminal history of Gaige Grosskreutz and thought we would take a look at that. And it's important to do this because there's a lot of rumors going around. His criminal past is rather mysterious. There's a question about whether he is really a convicted felon or not. Let's take a look and see what we have here. So we have 6 total offenses here. He's starting off with a simple assault, domestic violence. Essentially, he slapped his grandmother. Number 2, and he was 17 at the time. I just want to make sure we understand that. Although, to be honest with you, so is Kyle. So I'm not sure that being 17 is any longer any kind of defense. Number 2, burglary of home, criminal trespass to a dwelling, disorderly conduct. That's a fun one. And so we'll take a look at that one in detail. Number 3, criminal damage to property. This one, he had an ex-girlfriend, and I guess he got jealous, threw a rock or something. He broke one of her windows in her house. He claims he got jealous because he thought she was having sex inside, and that the window breaking was accidental. She claimed it was on purpose. He did send somewhat of a veiled threat to her via text. I'm not going to go through that one there because that is one where I could understand it. Maybe he's correct in that. Number 5, we have loud noise and obedience to officers. Now, you might not think that that's very interesting. Let's take a look at that because it gives you a really good idea about what Gaige is really like. And then number 6, prowling, and basically acting like a jackass, or otherwise, as we call them, First Amendment auditors. So let's take a look. Now, I've highlighted, it's 92 pages here, by the way, so if you want to read all of it, go on ahead. This document is provided by This document is provided by wisconsinnews.com or something. It's a news outlet provided where they just basically compile news items and kind of amateurish. However, I went and looked at this document. This looks genuine. It would take way too much time and effort to fake. So I believe that these documents here are actually valid. It's 92 pages. If you want to look through it, go ahead. I'll provide a link to it in the description. So we first start off here. I'll get down to the juicy stuff. This is his fight with his grandmother. And this gives you an idea about what kind of person Gaige Grosskreutz is. Now, keep in mind, he's 17, but for some reason, nobody seems to be giving Kyle any kind of leeway in that regard. He's 17 as well. So let's hear it. Okay, so his grandmother is called, his grandmother's named Janice, or maybe Janice. I will probably end up using both pronunciations here. Janice stated her 17-year-old grandson, Gaige, who is no longer on scene, got into an argument with her. Janice stated during the argument, Gaige swung a lamp into the living room wall, damaging the lamp as well as the living room wall, and then struck her across the face with an open hand, causing her pain. Now here's what's kind of fun. Janice stated her grandson has been living with her for over a year. Gaige was kicked out of his mother's house due to his behavior and inability to get along with his mother. Okay, so he's been thrown out of his own mother's house and he's living with his grandmother, and he ends up slapping her and basically tearing her house up. Now, what caused it? Evidently, he got his cell phone taken away from him at school, and so he wanted his grandmother to come get him. She wouldn't do it because he was really rude to her, which don't blame her for that. And then when he came home or somehow got home, the altercation started. He's really mad about the fact that she would not pick him up. Janice stated when she got home, Gaige was upset and was yelling at her about not answering her cell phone and not going to school so he could get his phone back. And there was an issue here about financial aid. I guess that the grandmother would not participate in a financial aid meeting. Janice stated Gaige then again continued to get upset and started arguing with her. Janice stated Gaige started throwing things around the house and was getting more and more out of control. Okay, so she leaves the house to get away from him and then decides, what the hell, it's my own home. Why can't I be there? So she goes back. Janice stated when she returned home and confronted Gaige, he lashed out at her and got into her face. This is his grandmother. Janice stated she told Gaige to get out of her house due to his behavior, but he refused to do so. It's trespassing. Janice stated Gaige was up in her face, challenging her to kick him out of the house, and was being constantly disrespectful. Yeah, I can believe that. Janice stated in order to get Gaige out of her face, she slapped him across his face. Good grandmothers will do that. Janice stated Gaige's behavior was making her fearful for her safety, so she reacted and slapped Gaige to get him out of her face. Janice stated Gaige then grabbed the lamp off of the end table in the living room and swung it at the living room wall, damaging both the lamp and the wall. Janice stated she continued to tell Gaige to leave the residence, at which time he refused to do so. This is a 17-year-old kid. And got back up into Janice's face. Janice stated as their argument continued, Gaige slapped her across the right side of her face with an open hand, which caused her pain. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, wait a minute. The grandmother slapped him first. That's true. And he clearly slapped her pretty hard. Now, keep in mind, though, what was it I was hearing that when Kyle got into a fight earlier before the Kenosha shooting, that he hit a female? Now, all of a sudden, it's hitting a female is not going to be any big deal here. Oh, so what? It was just his grandmother. And he slapped her across the face, causing her pain. But she slapped him first. Is it fair? I mean, what difference should it make whether the person is a female or a male that gets slapped? Well, you guys weren't using that argument. Well, what was the argument when Kyle got into a fight earlier? Can't hit a girl. Oh, that shows you what kind of character Kyle is. He would hit a female. Well, there you go. Right here. Gaige Grosskreutz slapped his grandmother enough to cause her pain. And he was 17, same age as Kyle. Okay, let's go ahead and read on. So not much more came of that. So we get to the next offense. And this next one is a real doozy. It is a glaring example of what happens when you're young and dumb. And we have 3 individuals here that are essentially going to burglarize a house. One is named Gaige Grosskreutz, the man of honor. The other one is called, his named Cody, and the third one is not named. We'll call him Bob because it was getting kind of awkward. So we'll call him Bob. And what they're going to do is they're going to burglarize a home at which they were frequenting earlier in the day. So they're inside this home. This girl that's in there tells them they have to leave because she's going somewhere. They leave, she leaves, and they know that the house is now unoccupied. And the comedy begins after the materials are stolen. It's a PlayStation 2, along with some other stuff, a couple of knives and stuff. And Gaige gets picked up for basically trying to sell it to what we call fencing it to a game, like a GameStop, one of these places that sells used games. So let's go ahead and take a look. Again, I highlighted certain things that I found were interesting. Now you can see it's long and involved, and yes, I did read all of it. Now this is the charging officer, so he's interrogating Gaige Grosskreutz. I asked Grosskreutz if he would be willing to make a recorded phone call to Bob regarding the burglary. Grosskreutz advised he would. So Grosskreutz's argument is that they give him the stolen property. He was trying to sell it. He was not involved in the burglary at all. Okay, so they say, well, I tell you what, if they're involved in the burglary, would you be willing to make a phone call to them and get them to sort of admit it? And he agreed to do it. It's going to get funny here, watch. Grosskreutz, Detective Schultz, and I went outside into my squad, I imagine he says into my squad car, and Grosskreutz was fitted with a recording device capable of recording both sides of the conversation. I recorded the precursor, and Grosskreutz called Bob at 2 p.m. at this phone number. Bob answered, and Grosskreutz told his detectives, Bob answered, and Grosskreutz told him detectives came by and they knew the Sony PS2 was stolen. Bob asked Grosskreutz what he told the police. Naturally, right? Like, well, what did you tell him? Grosskreutz told Bob the PS2 was stolen and inquired if Foley, the other person involved in this burglary, still had the Wii system, or is it Y? I'm sorry, I don't know all this stuff. I think it's Wii. And inquired if Foley still had the Wii system and if Macho, another person involved, still had the PS3 system. Grosskreutz added, if Macho and Foley still possess those systems, they should return the items. Bob and Grosskreutz talked about if they were going to get charged or referred with a crime. Bob asked what type of questions the police asked. Again, what are they asking you? Grosskreutz advised the police asked what happened that night and where all the property went. Bob then asked, so they know you broke in? Ho, 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 ho. Grosskreutz became nervous and responded, no. Bob asked, they don't know you broke in? They just know you sold a stolen PS3? He then corrected himself, a PS2. Grosskreutz responded, no, I didn't. Bob responded, what do you mean you didn't? Grosskreutz paused a long time and the call ends. Okay. Hey, Gaige Grosskreutz, got a little tip for you. If you're going to play informant and make a phone call to somebody you burglarized a house with, make sure you're not the one that was involved in the burglary. Because the person on the other end might make statements that incriminate you. Shit, dumbass. Never should have agreed to do this. Grosskreutz advised Detective Schultz and I there was a bad connection. Oh, how did that call end? There must have been a bad connection. Because Bob is at school and the call was disconnected. Detective Schultz tells Grosskreutz he believes Grosskreutz was involved in the burglary because he could partially hear what Bob was saying. Bob called back and asked what questions the police asked Grosskreutz. By the way, it appears to me that Grosskreutz did not know that the police were recording both sides of the conversation. So in other words, he agreed to do it, but he didn't know they were listening in. Okay, so they would have had to have received a warrant to be able to do that, and I assume they did. So let's read on. Bob called back and asked what questions the police asked Grosskreutz. Grosskreutz responds, "Were you with them? Were you the one who broke in? Who was with you?" Bob asked. "So they just think you sold the stolen one? They don't think you broke in, do they?" Grosskreutz responds, "No." Bob responds, "Good. With all that they can get you with is such," and then the call ends. Grosskreutz claims the call keeps cutting out and finally acknowledged he was present when the burglary occurred. So this is what you call the 1 or 2 beer story, okay? Well, when you've had too much to drink and then the police officer asks, "Well, how much did you have?" "Well, I haven't had anything to drink." "Oh, really? We have somebody who says that they saw you drinking." "Okay, it was only 1 beer." "Oh, really? Well, you seem to be pretty drunk." "Well, okay, maybe it was 2 beers." Okay, so you get the 1 or 2 beer story, and we're going to see Grosskreutz doing that. Sahan and Grosskreutz stayed in the car because Grosskreutz didn't want anything to do with the burglary. So he's claiming, "Yeah, I was there, but man, they went in to burglarize his home, and I didn't want anything to do with that." At that point, Bob calls back, and Grosskreutz answers the call. Probably should have done that. Bob asks why Grosskreutz keeps hanging up on him. Grosskreutz advised Bob he believes it is on Bob's end where the connection is the problem. No, it's not. Grosskreutz keeps hanging up because Bob keeps saying things that incriminates Grosskreutz in the crime. Bob then gives his opinion regarding Grosskreutz selling the stolen Sony PlayStation 2, and the police can't charge Grosskreutz with burglary based upon selling it. Grosskreutz tells Bob they should try to get the stuff back. They talk about getting the stolen property back in order to barter a deal. Okay. Bob gives advice to Grosskreutz, telling him not to admit anything and watch his words. They continue to talk about that, and Grosskreutz gets nervous on the phone, and the call disconnects again. Grosskreutz and I returned to the interview room from my squad car to clear up the earlier discrepancies in his story. Grosskreutz related the following information. Grosskreutz left the Thompson residence and was driven back to his apartment by Bob. Grosskreutz arrived home, and Wenzel, that's his girlfriend, arrived at approximately the same time. Grosskreutz stayed at the apartment with Wenzel, and Bob left. A short time later, Bob texted Grosskreutz and asked if he was interested in getting some bag, meaning marijuana. Bob, Foley, and Sahan all returned to Grosskreitz's apartment, and they left briefly to purchase marijuana. All 4 subjects were in Bob's car smoking marijuana in the parking lot at Grosskreitz's apartment. This is your paramedic, by the way. As they were smoking marijuana, the topic of discussion was about Foley and the burglaries he committed while living in the state of Washington. Someone in the conversation then remembered Bob wasn't home. Grosskreutz said one thing led to another, and it started off as a joke like, "Ha ha, let's break into this bitch's house." Yeah, because I always joke with my friends about burglarizing people's homes. However, Bob and Foley were serious about it, and it wasn't until they were actually in front of Thompson's house that Grosskreutz realized this was actually going to happen. So I thought it was just a joke that we were going to go over there and burglarize the house, and then we get there, and they're actually burglarizing it. Oh my God! If only I had known. Once at the Thompson residence, now keep in mind the Thompson residence is the home they burglarized, Bob parked on the street. Initially, Grosskreutz said he stayed in the car the entire time with Sahan, while Bob and Foley entered the residence. The point of entry to the residence was a service door through the garage. Bob and Foley were in the residence for approximately 20 minutes when they came back with a backpack full of items. Grosskreutz couldn't recall who had the backpack because he was intoxicated, but recalled Bob and Foley told him they got a couple of game systems. So this is Grosskreutz's interview with the police, and he's claiming that he just hung out in the car and he was drunk and they went in and burglarized it. The police officer said, "I didn't believe Grosskreutz was being truthful." Yeah, you think? And suspected he entered the house as well. I questioned Grosskreutz further about that. Grosskreutz related the following. Grosskreutz, Bob, and Foley exited the car and walked up to the service door that was entered. Grosskreutz saw the door was unlocked, and after seeing the unlocked door, Grosskreutz claimed he returned to Bob's vehicle and joined Sahan. So the story changes a little bit more. After about 20 minutes, Bob and Foley exited and returned to the vehicle. They were happy and talking about the property they had stolen. As they drove, Bob said since the police didn't come, they should return to the house. As they returned to the Thompson residence, so they burglarized the house, and now they're going back for more. They returned to Grosskreutz's apartment and went their separate ways for the evening. I still do not believe Grosskreutz did not enter the Thompson residence. I attempted once again to get him to tell the truth. Grosskreutz related the following. Grosskreutz admitted he was the one who actually opened the surface door where Bob and Foley entered. So now again, the 1 or 2 beer story. Grosskreutz took one step into the garage and claimed he backed out at that point. Okay, see how so first of all, he was not involved. Now he's only staying in the car. The next one is that he went to the service store and came back. And now he's saying he went into the garage but came back. Like, it's like putting your toe in the water, right? Grosskreutz immediately recanted and said he didn't go in, but acknowledged he opened the door and permitted Bob and Foley to enter behind him. As Bob entered, he told Grosskreutz, yeah, I won't read it. Keep in mind, Grosskreutz opened the door and allowed them in. That's burglary. This is why you want to talk to a lawyer. Grosskreutz thinks that he is getting himself off the hook. He's just implicating himself. Always talk to a lawyer first. Grosskreutz didn't know who broke the lights or took the coins. Grosskreutz claimed he also didn't know the Sony PS2 he sold to Mega Media Exchange belonged to the Thompson family. You would have thought that he might have had a clue at this point. Grosskreutz said Bob or Foley sold the stolen Sony PlayStation 3 to a neighbor of Foley. That neighbor was described as a Puerto Rican male called Macho. The Sony PlayStation 3 accessories and games were sold for $100. $100? Oh boy. All right, well, let's go ahead, and I know that was kind of long and stuff, but basically, if we get down here further, let's read this. Bob inquired several times what would happen to him if he told the truth. This is just to show you some of the idiocy of people when they are cornered by the police, and they want to try some strategy to get out. The strategy is call your lawyer. Bob inquired several times what would happen to him if he told the truth. He asked me, hypothetically speaking, what would happen if I were to give you the truth? At that point, Bob became nervous and stood up in the interview room. Bob was immediately directed to sit back down and responded by saying, I'm sticking to my story, 100%. Bob, let me give you a little clue here. When you tell the police, hypothetically, what would happen if I told you the truth, then it does no good to stick to your story. You admitted that your story was a lie. Oh boy, dumb, just dumb. This is the case where a bedroom window is smashed. I'm not going to go into this one. I could see where there could be some doubt here. It's not worth worrying about. So this one here concerns the arrest for driving under the influence. Now, Gaige Grosskreutz in his interview sort of washed over this a little bit. He said he had run-ins with the law recently. Yeah, well, a little bit more than that. Gaige runs through a red light right in front of a police officer. The officer pulls in behind him, hits the lights. He's pulled Gaige over, and this is where we pick up the story. As I was speaking to Grosskreutz, I could tell that his eyes were bloodshot and glassy. Okay, I also could detect an odor of intoxicants emitting from the vehicle. I asked Grosskreutz where he was coming from, and he told me a friend's in Waukesha. He then told me he came from a bar about an hour ago where he had a couple of drinks. Don't talk to the police. Don't. You give them your driver's license, you give them your registration, and you give them your proof of insurance, and that's all you give them. You don't say nothing to them. Call your lawyer. You know, and I understand, you know, you get pulled over by the police, and what you want to do is to try to act and talk like you're not drunk. If I speak and I talk in a certain way, show them that I'm not drunk, they'll let me go. But when you talk, they can smell the alcohol on your breath. So, and you're probably going to stammer at some point. Give them your driver's license, your proof of insurance, and your registration, and nothing else. And yes, sovereign citizens, you do have to give them those three things. I know there are a lot of people who say that they don't because it's some sort of Fifth Amendment argument. Wrong. And they go into court, they try to plead this case, they lose every time. He also told me he had enough to be under the legal drinking limit. What good is that testimony here? You've already told him you've been drinking. The officer is not going to say, oh, well, if you haven't had that much, I guess we'll let you go. I asked Grosskreutz for insurance, and he told me he did not have any insurance on the vehicle. Ouch. I had Grosskreutz remain in the vehicle while I returned to my patrol car, where I conducted a records check of him. On the records check, it showed Grosskreutz had a valid open warrant with the Racine County Sheriff's Department. I have no idea what that warrant was for. I cannot seem to find any information on it. But I'm kind of curious as to what they were looking for him for. Was it a bench warrant? So in other words, was it signed by a judge to go get him? Maybe he failed to show up in court. Maybe he was wanted for an arrest. I don't know. I notified dispatch of this warrant, and Officer Kummer was then dispatched to my location. Also on the records check, I did not notice any prior operating while intoxicated incidents. So it goes on. Before Grosskreutz exited the vehicle, he informed me that he had a firearm on his person. Okay, good. I mean, he told the police he had a firearm, that we're just supposed to do. He said it was also openly carried. I asked if he had a permit for this, and he told me yes. Later, Grosskreutz told me he was currently working on getting his concealed carry permit. Grosskreutz did not want to make a statement to me. At 5:38 a.m., I read Grosskreutz his Miranda rights off of the Miranda rights warning card that I was issued by the Greenfield Police Department. Holy cow, do you have to put all that in? Grosskreutz agreed to answer questions without a lawyer present. Oh, no. Don't do that. I then took his statement. Grosskreutz told me he was coming from his friend's house in New Berlin, and they were just hanging out and talking. I asked if he was coming from a bar, and he said he did. However, he said he did not remember the name of the bar or where it was located. So you went to a bar, but you don't remember the name of the bar or where it was. Okay? Guess what? Will that be used against him? Absolutely. Must have been pretty drunk. I asked Grosskreutz how much he had to drink, and then he requested an attorney present. I then ended the interview. Well, you should have had the attorney on board a lot sooner. Okay, so the deal here was he's drunk, he's driving, and he's got a firearm, a loaded firearm, and he got in some trouble for that. Now, he later becomes a paramedic. Okay. I don't know. It seems like he lacks some judgment. On November 4th, 2019, officers were notified by dispatch they had received a call about loud music playing at a certain address in the city of Ashland. Okay, now this is not a serious crime. There's not much serious going on here, but the details are really quite interesting. Okay, so the officers show up and they hear loud music and they step onto the property to question the people there. There are two people there. One is Gaige Grosskreutz, and the other one that's another male. Don't know his name. I think it's mentioned here somewhere. It starts here. The other male refused to provide identification and again stated that officers needed a warrant to be on his property. No. They got a call. They can be on your property. Okay, so let's take a look at this other one. This is a complaint about loud music. There are two people involved here, Gaige and another male called Blake. So the other male, and they're referring here to Gaige, refused to provide identification and again stated that officers needed a warrant to be on the property. I recognize this individual as Gaige Grosskreutz from previous professional contacts. You know what that means. And was able to provide his information to dispatch. So he knows Gaige already from past contacts, and so well that he was able to just tell everybody on the other end who he was. Probably even knew his weight and height and everything. While providing information to dispatch, Gaige began to approach Officer Bybee in an aggressive manner, causing Officer Bybee to draw his taser and order Gaige to step back. After Officer Bybee repeated the order for Gaige to step back, he eventually did, and Officer Bybee holstered his taser. Now it says here, Blake was given his driver's license back, instructed to turn down the music, and informed he was free to go. So Blake cooperated. They gave him back his driver's license and said, you're cool. Not Gaige. This is Mr. Decision Maker. Gaige could have simply given him his driver's license. Nothing would have come of it. But no. During our contact with Gaige, he pulled out his cell phone and began recording our interaction with him and telling us to get off his property. I have no problem with pulling out a cell phone and recording the interaction, although it's a very First Amendment auditor kind of thing to do. Telling them to get off the property, they have probable cause. They don't have to. I again informed Gaige that we were lawfully there, yep, due to a noise complaint that had been called in by a citizen. That's right. Citizens called in a complaint, police can show up on your property. I attempted to explain to Gaige that he needed to turn his music down and go inside for the night. Now this is outside, they're on the front lawn. While I was trying to explain this to Gaige, he continued to talk over me and state that we needed to get off this property. So this is a really common tactic by First Amendment auditors and sovereign citizens, and that is when the officer is trying to talk to you, you talk over them so that they can't get their words out. It is extremely frustrating, and at some point it can probably be considered obstruction of an investigation. I informed Gaige that I was attempting to give him a warning for the noise ordinance violation, and he stated, I don't care, just give me a ticket. So the officer says, look, we're just trying to tell you to turn down your music. And Gaige is saying, give me a ticket. At this time, Officer Goodlet had arrived on scene and had attempted to speak with Gaige without success. Gaige was informed that he'd be receiving citations in the mail for violating Ashland City ordinances, and officers cleared from the call. Now, this is your decision maker. They came to his property. They just wanted to tell him to turn the noise down. And he instead got cited because he just wouldn't cooperate. All right, let's take a look at another one. Okay, so this is another officer's take on this scene. He was there as well. And I'll skip to the second paragraph here. Gaige did not cooperate, and he told Blake not to cooperate. So essentially, he's not going to go along with it. And he's telling Blake not to as well. That could be a misdemeanor. I don't know. Blake was polite and tried his best to keep Gaige calm. Blake should be the paramedic. Gaige's eyes were red and glassy. His speech was slurred and his balance was poor. Well, now, where did we see that before? Oh, yeah, well, when he was pulled over while driving. Gaige smelled strongly of intoxicants. Gaige appeared to be very intoxicated. Gaige seems to have a problem with booze. During this time, Gaige began recording the incident using his cell phone. Okay, that's okay. Gaige advanced towards me, got in my face, and was about 1 foot away. I used my left hand to push Gaige back, and I took a step backwards. I drew my taser and held it into my side. I told Gaige to stay back. Officer Kroll informed Gaige that he would be cited for the noise violation. During this time, Officer Goodlet arrived on scene. Blake agreed to care for Gaige because of his high level of intoxication. Gaige continued to swear at law enforcement until we cleared him from the scene. Okay, so I realize it sounds like just a simple noise ordinance. We play our music too loud, the cops knock on the door, hey, turn that shit down. We're like, all right. And Blake, his friend, was all about that. He's like, okay, didn't know we were bothering people. I mean, yeah, I like to play my music loud, ask my kids sometime. However, if I'm bothering somebody else, I'll turn it down. I don't mean to cause other people grief. And Blake seems to be on board with that, but not Gaige. Gaige is just a jackass. He's drunk, belligerent, and unwilling to even face simple logic. This is your paramedic. This occurred about 2 weeks before the shooting. And it's not a serious crime. However, the details kind of give you a little bit of idea what Gaige is kind of like. So here it goes. This is the officer's observations. I observed Gaige walking in the grass on the south side of the police parking area between the fence and the driveway near the fence opening for vehicles. Gaige appeared to be recording the vehicles inside the fence. When I asked Gaige what he was doing, his explanation was nothing and that he could be here. Now, where do we see this before? This is typical First Amendment auditor crap, okay? So they describe the area, and then we go to the next. Based on Gaige's previous attempt to withhold his identity, so this is the second time he's done this. It looks like the first time they were able to get him to kind of cooperate, so they didn't cite him. But he's done it again. Based on Gaige's previous attempt to withhold his identity, his parking away from the property which he decided to lurk around, his previous prowling warning for being in the same area, the time of night, Gaige concealing himself by walking in the grass rather than the sidewalk or driveway, and Gaige having no explanation or reason for being in the area, I arrested Gaige for prowling. Now, why are they going through so much here? Well, because there's the First Amendment deal where a person just happens to be in a parking area and you want to build a case that this person really has no really good reason to be there and that everything he's doing is drawing suspicion that he may be up to no good. First Amendment auditors, let me tell you, they can trespass you from public property. You better figure that out at some point. People, they're always saying, oh, well, you're trespassing me and this is public property. Yes, they can do that. Now, they can't do it without some, protocol, but Here, Gaige is doing exactly the kind of things that First Amendment auditors do. They try to make themselves look guilty of something so that they can get cops to come out and then start an argument. It's dumb, and it's also infuriating if you try to deal with these people. Essentially, they're going to have you come out and they're going to poke you as much as possible to get you into a fight. That's what they do. So in the end, Gaige was provided municipal citation for prowling. He was provided a court date of 9/21/20 at 8:30 in the morning. I completed a PR bond for Gaige, which he wanted to read. After I explained the PR bond and Gaige read it, he refused to sign the PR bond. Well, what good does that do? I noted he refused on the PR bond and provided him a copy with the citation. Gaige crumpled up the citation and PR bond and threw them in the garbage of the booking room. After completing the booking process, Gaige was released. So the guy comes off as just a number one grade A jackass. He is uncooperative. He obviously has real problems with the police. Now, there was another interview that I posted with Ryan Balch, who also is anti-government. But Gaige seems to take this to a deeper personal level. And, just being a horse's ass. Okay, so let's go ahead. There's another couple of things I want to show. This is a result of the actual request for information. I won't read that. Now here's his criminal history, and it's long, but it's actually just really repetitive. There are really 7 incidences in total, or there are 6 maybe, in total here, and they're going to expand it out and make it really look long. I don't think we want to exaggerate it. But there's a couple of interesting things here. Okay, so let's take a look at this charge. This is the first charge in the sequence, in case there are more than one. They list a statute, burglary, any building or dwelling. And they mention this charge severity, felony. Down here, they list another one, and the difference between this one and the first one is this one says party to. So it looks like he's getting charged for actually doing the burglary, and there's another charge for being a party to it. I don't know if they're separate charges or what, but it's the same event. It's the burglarizing of a home, and it's also listed as a felony. So my question is very simple. Did he plea bargain down? Was the felony expunged? He claims in a video after the shooting that he had a right to carry a concealed weapon. Now, he's been charged with a felony. And this was some time before the shooting. So it's not an outstanding problem. He had to have taken care of it by then. So the only thing I can think of is that maybe he plea bargained down, or maybe he did something to expunge the felony off of his record, or he's lying and he does have a felony and he's not allowed to have a concealed carry weapon. I don't know. I wouldn't think that Gaige would lie about not having a felony. I know he doesn't seem like a real honest type, and you can see that he lies all throughout that the one burglary event. He was lying about everything there. So what does this all mean? Well, Gaige Grosskreutz is going to be on the stand. We know that in the upcoming trial. And of course, the defense is going to be able to cross-examine him. One of the things that they will likely point out is that in the arrest proceedings for the burglary, Gaige lied. He lied constantly, changed his story. Will the detectives who investigated that burglary put on the stand? Absolutely. What was your impression of the witness? Well, he's a liar. He lied to us constantly. Now, some of the other things, bad decision making, things like smoking pot, is that admissible? The two sides will argue that over during the discovery phase, and it'll be up to the judge to decide. But Gaige's dishonesty is going to be an issue. If you're the defense, wouldn't you raise it? I would. I would, as much as possible, go over all of these offenses. His attitude towards the police may not be admissible, but I try to get it in there. Because if that rises up and the jury gets to hear that, there are going to be members of the jury who are not going to look upon that favorably. So, who knows? So there are some outstanding questions I still have for this. One, I'd like to know more about that warrant in Racine County. Remember, he was picked up during the DUI, and one of the things that came out was that he was wanted on a warrant from the Racine County Sheriff's Department. I don't know anything about that. If you know, I'd love to hear it. I would only really want credible sources, though. Another thing I'd like to know about is this past felony arrest for burglary. Was he convicted on a felony? It seems not. However, what did happen? Was he convicted on a felony and then the felony expunged? Did he plea bargain down to a misdemeanor? I don't know. If you happen to know, by all means, let me know. But again, I really only want credible sources. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a lot more about Gaige Grosskreutz. I hope we cut through some of the myths and fables about this man. And just remember, he's a paramedic. Oh boy. Press like or subscribe. Press like and subscribe to my channel. I got more videos coming out, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.